It's almost 20 years since the British legal system acknowledged one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in modern times. 6 men, known as the Birmingham Six, were finally freed after spending 16 years in prison for 2 murderous IRA bomb attacks which they did not commit. I've come to Glasgow to meet one of those 6 men, Paddy Hill. It's 20 years since he ceased to be, in his own words, a hostage held by the British state. Has he managed to rebuild his life?
Told us from the start that they knew we hadn't done it. They told us they didn't care who done it. They told us that we were selected and that they were going to frame us just to keep people in there happy. That's what it's all about. It's this.
Paddy Hill, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's almost 20 years now since your release. Do you feel like a free man today?
No. Never. When you're in jail fighting your wrongful conviction, and through the experience of ourselves and of course other prisoners, you never think of the outside world. And of course everything is just geared up for getting to the Court of Appeal and praying that and wishing that you win your case. You don't have any plans really about the outside world. And of course there's an old saying, Stephen, be very careful what you wish for when you get it you may not know what to do with it. And that is very, very apt for us. We're wishing to get our freedom back, and then suddenly you get it, and believe me, it is nothing like you imagine it. If you'd have told me the day I got released that I would not be able to handle the outside world, I would have laughed in your face. After what I've been through, living in maximum security prisons, which, to be honest with you, are nothing more than war zones. Violence is rife, life is cheap, they're cold, brutal, places that are filled with nothing but anger, rage, frustration and violence. And then suddenly you get out, and in prison, if somebody bumps into you in prison, the first thing to think about is stabbing him, because you know he's going to stab you. It's all about face, macho. And you come outside and you walk down the street and everybody's bumping into you. And the panic attacks, we know nothing about money. We got £50,000 when we first came out, 3 weeks after we got out. I'd love to sit here and tell you I spent it. I didn't. I squandered it. I was giving it away.
But it is 20 years now. And
yeah.
I am amazed that the ferocity of your anger and the complications about your feelings, which you've just described, are still there 20 years on.
Yeah, because when we got out, of course, you find out so many things after you get out, and it fuels the anger. When I came out, my anger was at this level, up here, but that was in respect of myself. I like to think that over the years, that anger has now subsided a bit, but in its place has come another anger, because when we got out, I've always said, if what happened to us meant that no one else would be wrongly convicted and tortured and framed, you could walk away. But there is more innocent people in prison today than there was 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about your work with other miscarriages of justice. But before we get there, I cannot help but turn to something you said only a few weeks ago. You said, every day, all I think about is getting a gun and
killing cops.
Shooting police.
Exactly.
How can you say that?
Because that's all I think about. My worst time is the morning. I don't sleep. I went to bed this morning at 1:15. I was in the kitchen having a cup of coffee at 3:25. I went back to bed at 4 o'clock. I'm back up again at 6:10. We don't sleep, we just catting up. And I don't know what happens when I go to sleep. I don't remember what I dream about. Very, very rare. Sometimes I have little snatches. But I have people like Jerry Conlon, who's been in Jerry Conlon refuses to stay in a hotel room with me. He says, you're crazy when you go to sleep.
Jerry Conlon's another victim of
Another
a miscarriage
victim.
of justice.
And as he says, in my sleep, I'm killing people, I'm slicing people, I'm kicking, I'm screaming. I don't remember any of this. But what I do remember is when I'm waking up, when I come round and the blood is pumping through your veins and the tension and the adrenaline flow, and all I think about is walking into that police station in Queen's Road in Aston in Birmingham. Just like one of them, like Arnie and what have you, in one of them films with a big machine gun and going, here, take this, and shooting every one of them. And believe me, I sit there and I smile at it.
And do you recognise that that is extraordinarily damaging to you?
Exactly, exactly.
I mean, that is corrosive. You are trapped.
I know I'm trapped, but one of the things that I can't get out of my head that triggers it all the time, what I can't forget, is that I went into the police station. I've never been arrested. I went into a police station of my own free will to be eliminated from their inquiries. I'd already been eliminated by Special Branch at 6:15 at Hysham Police Station. They told the Hysham Police to let us go. T14, the security forces in the north of Ireland, told them to let us go. They knew who we were and we weren't involved. My brothers were in the British Army fighting the IRA then.
And this, of course, happened in November
1974.
But you speak to me as though you can still feel the pain of that.
You bet
right
I can.
now.
You bet I can't forget it.
You used a big word. You called it torture. We're talking about Britain. We're talking about a country which has signed every single international convention against the use of torture.
Exactly, and still being used. You know, they told us right from the beginning what they were going to do with us. And that's exactly what they did. They had a free hand.
Do you remember signing the confession?
I
the
didn't
whole
sign.
point of their operation on you was to get you to sign a piece of paper.
That's right. They told me to sign under the right-hand corner at the top of the page under the caution and the bottom right-hand corner. I never signed it. Two of us didn't sign, me and Jerry Hunter. The other four did. They signed false confessions. And when you look at the confessions, a blind man can see that they're a load of rubbish. In one confession, there's 12 or 14 bombs. In another one, there's 8. In Johnny Walker's, there's 2 brown paper bags, parcels. Come Billy Power's statement, the bombs were put outside the mulberry bush, but in actual fact, they were put inside.
And what matters more to you? What damaged you more? Because we've talked about the corrosive anger. What damaged you more? Was it all of that that went with the gross injustice that was done to you, or was it then living in a prison system which you've described as evil, as a living hell, for 16 and a half years afterward? Which was, in the end, worse for you to live with?
The cops. That's the hardest part. I can't speak on behalf of the other 5, only in respect of the fact that the other 5 don't have any criminal convictions. I'd been in trouble with the police before. I've been in trouble with the police since I came over to the country, since 1960. And violence was nothing new to me.
You were a criminal.
No, I wasn't. I was fighting and, you know, the usual petty things, you know, what do you call it? So I'd been in prison for stabbing people and slicing people. So I knew what prison life was about, but I accepted.
And you weren't a nice guy.
Oh, no. I tell people everywhere, like, I was not a good guy. I would have sliced you as quick as look at you. And I'd been in prison, so I knew what prison life was about, but at least I was guilty of it. And it's acceptable. You hear this fallacy about everybody in jail claiming they're innocent. That's a load of rubbish. Most people that are guilty will tell you they're guilty, and they could just bow their heads and get on with it. And for so-called professional criminals, going to prison is like paying tax. That's part of the job. And they accept it. But they don't cry and moan about it. But when you're innocent, whoa. And of course, when you're in prison and you tell them you're innocent, the only thing you're guaranteed is a hard time on the merry-go-round. And I had plenty of that, moving from one prison to another. Out of the 16 and a half years that I was in prison, I probably spent at least 8 of that in solitary confinement, because I wouldn't conform to the prison system. Prison conditions you so subtly, you don't even know you're being conditioned. It's like a soldier. The only thing is, a soldier has a choice. He joins the army of his own free will. But when he joins the army on Monday, they don't send him to Iraq or Afghanistan on the Tuesday. They train him for what he's going to be involved in, to the best of their ability, so he knows what he's getting in. With us, we were just suddenly plucked off and then thrown into the prison system, and we were the most hated prisoners in the prison system. Prison officers were offering people hundreds of pounds to stab us. They were in our food, spitting in our food, urinating in it, you name it. We had it all, putting glass in it. When you went out in the exercise yard, we're throwing out jam jars full of excreta, trying to smash them against your head when you're walking by the prisoners. This is what we had to contend with 24/7 in the prison system. But as I say, you become conditioned to live in prison, and it's like a soldier who's living in a battle zone. Hey, sooner or later he'll adapt to his surroundings. He has to if he wants to survive, and we have to do the same. And prison, not only that, but prison kills your emotions. You die a little bit every day. And then one day you waking up, don't ask me what day, but one day you will waking up and you know that you are changed forever. You know that nothing will ever, ever hurt you again.
You specifically named several police officers whom you say were specifically responsible for manufacturing evidence, for abusing you. Would it have made a difference to you if those individuals had been pursued through the courts?
Oh, definitely, definitely. That's the one thing that we fought. And when we had 5 of them charged, 2 of them, the charges against 2 of them were dropped after, I think it was the 3rd court appearance, and the other 3 carried on. And after about the 6th or 7th appearance, they were appearing at the Southern Crown Court in London. And then after the 6th or 7th appearance, suddenly a magistrate from outside Greater London sat that day, and he made a ruling that they wouldn't get a fair trial because of all the adverse publicity. Adverse publicity? Hey, before I even set foot in the court, you had the Assistant Chief Constable Mortis Buck on world television telling everybody, we caught the people who done it. They're covered from head to toe with nitroglycerine. Adverse publicity. So please, how does it work for cops? It doesn't work for us, the public. And remember one thing, we're all supposed to be equal under the eyes of the law. What applies to you applies to me. It applies to everybody right across the board. But in this country, no, there's 2 sets of laws, one for them and one for us, the public.
But I come back to that word reconciliation. Clearly, these men abused the notion of justice and they abused you. But in the end, wouldn't it be in your interest, in Paddy Hill's interest, to get beyond that? Maybe even to find a way years after to come to terms with it, even to forgive.
Well, quite a few of them are dead now, so you couldn't do nothing about them, you know.
How, given the strength of that, how do you relate to family? How do you relate to friends now that you are, and have been for a long time, a free man?
My own family, my kids, when I got out, you come and you see your kids and they're just like talking to strangers. In fact, you'd rather be in the company of strangers because you don't expect nothing from strangers.
You'd rather be
in the company of strangers than be in the company of my family. I realised that very shortly after I got out, and I felt nothing for them. And I had to tell my kids that. In fact, it came about through an argument, and my daughter just went into one. She started screaming at me and she was crying hysterically. And she said to me, Dad, you come up here Said, and you spend a half an hour with us. Says, and then you go and you'll drive for hours to your prison to spend time with people. Said, I don't have many memories of you before you went away. And I've waited 16 and a half years for you to come home. Said, and you've been out just over a year. Says, and let me tell you something. Says, I'm never going to get you back. Says, I don't know what's happened to you. I don't know where you belong. But she said, you don't belong to us.
Could you say anything back to her?
I just stood there. And I burst into tears. And I don't feel nothing for you. And I still don't feel nothing for my kids. And I feel so sorry. I feel so sorry for them because they're never ever going to have a relationship with me.
But how can how can you know that? I mean, it is 20 years you've been wrestling with the deepest of feelings. But is there not a part of you that does believe you can reconnect?
It's too far, it's gone too long. If I'd had some help when I first came out, maybe. But now, I don't think so.
What about the others in the Birmingham Six? One is now dead. But,
yeah, Richard died 5 years ago.
Is there anything you get from talking to them? Because after all, they are the men who've been through the same experience you've been through.
No, because I hardly ever speak to him. Jerry Hunter, I believe, is living somewhere in Portugal. I haven't seen, the last time I've seen Jerry once in about 10 years, and that was at Richard's funeral in Ireland when he died 5 years ago. And Johnny Walker, I haven't seen Johnny for about 10, I haven't seen him at the funeral as well. That was the first time I've seen Johnny in about 5 years, and I haven't seen him since. Hughie Callaghan, I haven't seen at all for about 10 years. And
is that because you don't want to?
I'm too busy getting on with my own thing and trying to keep myself together, and I know that they're all having their own problems.
I hope this doesn't sound trite, but you know what's in my mind? An image of Nelson Mandela locked up for so long by the apartheid regime in South Africa, who'd suffered terrible things at the hands of that government. He came out and his message was one of reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. Does that mean anything to you?
No, because the one thing you'll never get from the British establishment is the truth. The British establishment, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most dirtiest, evilest, corrupted, perverted establishments in the world. And I say that without any fear of contradiction.
But can you not, in any way, after all this time, distance yourself a little bit from the terrible things that happened to you and understand why things happened? I mean, for example, in 1974, understand that in Britain there was a profound fear of IRA bombs. The police were under enormous pressure. Dozens and dozens of innocent people were being killed. And that's why, in the end, the police were desperate to nail somebody from the crime of the Birmingham pub bombing. So does that not make any difference to you, putting it into some sort of a context?
No. Why should it? Just because the police are under pressure, they can go and torture people and frame them, fit them up and send them to jail, ruin their lives, their families' lives. Does that give the people in Ireland the right to go out and kill soldiers, which you condemn, because they kill people in Ireland? Tit for tat? No way. It doesn't work that way. After all, you want to remember, we pay the police to do a job and to do it properly. We expect them to be honest. We don't expect them to then become the terrorists and the torturers. And if they do, then something should be done about it.
I want to ask you something else, which is connected but a little bit different. It's about the political mood and whether you see any parallels between the 1970s, when you were a young man from Northern Ireland trying to make a living in England, at a time when there was profound public fear of Northern Irish terrorism in mainland Britain. Whether you see any parallels with what we've seen in the last decade, profound fear in Western countries, of profound fear of jihadi Islamist terror, and laws passed, anti-terror laws passed, policing operations undertaken, which some in the Muslim community have claimed were discriminatory toward them. Do you see parallels?
Oh yeah, with the Irish, yeah. I've been saying it for years. I've been saying it for the last 10 years. The same thing is going to happen to the Muslim communities as will happen to the Irish. The only thing is, as I tell people when I'm speaking, don't do to the Muslim community what you did to the Irish. They allowed the Irish communities in England to be isolated. Don't do it to the Muslim community, because that only breeds terrorism.
Before we end, I want to just quote to you something that you said as you walked out of that court 20 years ago, high on adrenaline. You were very angry and you explained to the public how you'd been scapegoated and misused, but you also said, now it's our turn.
Exactly, to tell the public the truth. And I've been doing it and telling it to the public since the day I got out, of how rotten, evil and corrupt. And I'll tell you what, you see, when I get people come to me as just a member of their family's just been, as they claim, being fitted up, just been found guilty and they're innocent, right? And I tell the people, listen, you see the government, you see all the so-called good people, but when you go to them, you're going to be very, very shocked, and you're going to be sickened by the response you get from the good people. Because the people that you think are there to help you will turn their back on you. But there's a good side of it. You're going to get help from the most unexpected sources you ever thought of, and that's perfectly true. And let me tell you something, we didn't get out of court, we didn't get our convictions overturned because of the government or the courts. I'll tell you what, we got our conviction overturned: public outcry. The one thing about the British public, when they see an injustice, they are not afraid to stand up and scream about it. And thank God, we were put into prison just to satisfy and to quell public outcry. And in the end, it was the public outcry that got us back out again.
Paddy Hill, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
It's been a pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much
It's been a pleasure.
indeed.